Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you to our presentation today about capturing lessons learned information, making your current and future projects smarter. My name is Bill Dow. I have 26 years of hands-on experience, 24 in project management, 9+ years at Microsoft, 11 running PMOs. I've been an instructor at Bellevue College in the local Seattle area for many, many years. Very passionate about project management, passionate about PMOs, and I'm a 4-time author: The PMO Lifecycle, Building, Running, and Shutting Down, The Tactical Guide for Building a PMO, Project Management Communication Tools, and back in 2008, I actually wrote the Project Management Communication Bible. So we got a great agenda today. We've got 5 items we're going to cover. We'll talk about reporting on lessons learned at your project kickoff. We'll talk about collecting lessons learned throughout the life of the project. That's so important. We'll go over reviewing lessons learned from past projects. We'll talk about showing discretion and capturing lessons learned information. And then finally, we'll talk about reporting lessons learned information at the end of the project. Okay, so today's project managers do not track lessons learned, right? That's a huge problem. They're not tracking lessons learned, and therefore they're not getting all the benefits of the goodness that we get out of lessons learned. We can show project managers survey after survey on why projects fail, and it really doesn't matter, because project managers, if they don't see the value in lessons learned, they won't do it, they won't capture them. And I see that all the time in all the PMOs I've ran. It's a bold statement, right? If they're not capturing lessons learned and they don't see value in it, they won't do it. And I know that's a bold statement, and I know we've got to kind of get past that. So why is that, right? Why do project managers not collect lessons learned, right? Why is that? What do we do about that, right? Who owns that problem? Is it the PM himself that's not doing it? Is it the PMO manager? Is it the PM's boss, right? Well, I'm here today to tell you it's the project manager's problem that he or she is not collecting lessons learned. Think about that. Just think about that statement. Who's the first person the customer looks to when there's a problem on the project? Who? Right? Who is that? It's the project manager, clearly. So if the project manager's not collecting lessons learned, it's he or she's problem for not doing it. So what are some of the main reasons? Why do project managers not collect lessons learned? Right? Why? Well, lack of time. They don't care. Right? The issues that they see in survey after survey, it's never going to happen to them. Lack of management support, lack of resources, lack of guidelines, lack of centralized knowledge, right? Why? Why do these reasons keep coming up, right? And these are really valid reasons, and we see this all the time. So some of these reasons seem valid, right? And that's really the problem we're seeing across project management today. Because they seem valid, project managers think they're valid, and therefore there's a problem. I actually fundamentally believe that the project managers don't collect lessons learned because they don't value the information. They're not going to do anything with the information once they collect it, and that's a huge problem, right? They don't believe the projects are going to fail. They don't believe, they believe they're smarter than everyone else. They're the best project managers in the world, and it's a huge problem because we see failure after failure after failure. So what do we do about that, right? So how can we solve this? How can we turn things around? How can we slowly convince project managers to start capturing their lessons learned on their projects? What do we do? Well, I've got a number of best practices, and the number one is report on lessons learned at the project kickoff. Okay, so start collecting lessons learned from the very first time you have a project status meeting. Right? So at the project kickoff review lessons learned information from past or similar type of projects. If you already know you're doing a project that has been done before, Well, let's go look at what they've done. Maybe they've done financials well. Maybe they've done communications well, right? Go look at that. Spend time, go over a couple slides, bring up that information, and just see if there's any information that would be relevant to your project. Now, the caveat to those discussions, right? It shouldn't take too long, but it's got to be a meaningful conversation. Right? You don't want this to be a checkbox activity. If someone has done a great job in another project, you want to use that. You want to do that same thing. So what do I mean by that, right? So what do I mean? Well, look at some of the challenges that projects have had around communicating information, running the project, dealing with stakeholders, dealing with team members that are in trouble, dealing with budget, right? Look at all those issues of running the project and then go over those, right? One of the most important areas that you can cover is how well they've communicated. How well did that project manager, or did they struggle, communicate the information? Did they struggle? Did it go well? Did they not go so well? That's the kind of information that you want to capture. So here's how you do it, right? It's very, very simple. Here's the project agenda. You got a kickoff agenda. You look at scope, resources, right? But the number one item is you're reviewing lessons learned. Now you're reviewing it not for your current projects because clearly you're just starting. You're going to review it from past projects. Other projects that are similar, other projects that occur in the organization. Let's look at some of that and see what they've done and then bring that into your project. Makes sense? And you put it right there on the top, right? It's at the very, very top. It's a first agenda item. But how well did reporting go? Did the team communicate? Were there special needs of the customer that you had to satisfy? Maybe your project's working with that exact same customer. So here's an example. You got the Jones project. Scope, several change requests, right? Project continued, the team continued to go through the CR process. The project team members hit every major milestone, which was awesome. But they had a huge turnover in staff and resources, and that's the areas that you want to watch, right? So they had this huge turnover, so you really want to sit down and have that area, and then really watch that for your project and see what kind of turnover and try to prevent turnover where possible. Right? And other examples, for example, I had one large project. I had a customer that wanted a status report every Thursday, and they wanted it hand delivered to them. I had to go over every inch of that document, colors and budgets and risks and issues, and I had to do that in person. I couldn't just launch them a status report, a Word document. They wanted that in person. Another example, I had another customer where they wanted a Microsoft project schedule delivered to them every Friday by end of day. So we had several projects working with this one customer, and that customer would get MPP files, Microsoft Project Schedule files, sent to them every Friday. But again, knowing this information from the project kickoff will really help your project team be prepared and really help them deliver a much more successful project. And there's thousands of examples, right? Clearly, there'd be thousands and thousands of examples. These were just some of the ones I experienced. So reviewing past projects' experiences will only set expectations from the very beginning and will set you up to run a successful project. I can't stress enough how important that is. Spend the time, go over the lessons learned information from these past projects. Take the goodness that you've learned and apply that to your projects. Really failing to do this, you could potentially make the same mistakes, have the same staff turnover, resource turnover, and really run into the same problems, and you don't want to do that. So let's look at best practice number 2, and that's collecting lessons learned throughout the life of the project. Well, wait a second. Everyone goes, oh, no, we do lessons learned at the end of the project. That's the worst mistake you can make. Collect lessons learned throughout the life of the project. So starting from the very first project status meeting and continuing throughout that process, you want to collect lessons learned. You want to make course corrections. The only reason you're collecting lessons learned is to adapt and to adjust. So you want to make those course corrections. Many project managers miss this, right? They lose that ability to see patterns. They lose that ability to see the problems and then make the course corrections along the way. Bob, he's always late on his deliverables. Mary, she's a horrible developer. Whatever the case may be, right? But you want to make that course correction. If you're collecting along the way, Bob's always late, Bob's always late, Bob's always late, you can very, very quickly adjust that and make changes with Bob. But how do you do that, right? How do you collect lessons learned throughout the life of the project? Well, like I said, from the very first status meeting, what's going well? Where are we struggling, right? We have these kind of conversations. We ask these kinds of questions. We don't actually say lessons learned. Are you doing okay? Is the project on time? Is the project on budget? Where do we struggle a little bit, right? This is the kind of probing and the probing kind of questions that really helps you collect lessons learned along the way. Those words don't have to be exact, and you certainly don't want to say lessons learned. The one thing you don't do, don't tell your team you're collecting lessons learned. Don't do it. They're going to get turned right off from it. Just don't do it. Actually use the different words. Don't say lessons learned, right? If you say lessons learned, they'll quickly devalue the process. It's just built into people that they're not valuing lessons learned until the end of the project. They don't value it in general. They're only going to value it at the end if they're going to do it anyway. Don't say lessons learned. So you have to be tricky. You have to collect the information, but they don't actually know that you're collecting it. But it's actually pretty easy. So here it is here, right? You got the same scenario. You've got your weekly status agenda. And number 8, lessons learned information. You could tweak that. You don't necessarily, no one's going to focus a lot on your standard agenda anyway, so don't worry about too much. But get it on there because that reminds you. And then what's going well? Where are we struggling? How are things going? Don't say the word lessons learned, right? Don't say those words, but actually collect that information. So incorporating your lessons learned information throughout the life of the project, and you do it via the agenda, is really a great way to drive a successful project. Essentially, it's allowing you to get on top of course corrections, adjusting staff, adjusting processes, changing budget, whatever the case may be. Just don't call it lessons learned. I can't stress enough. Capture it much more discreetly, but then use that information. When you're capturing lessons learned, don't make the process too complex either, right? You want big buckets. You want big buckets in a document, a spreadsheet, OneNote, whatever the case may be. Budget, what went right, what went wrong, what could have gone better. Schedule, what went right, what went wrong, right? You want to have these in buckets to be able to categorize them, to then focus and really be specific on what you're trying to collect. And then, of course, what you're trying to change. So again, here's the step: initiation, planning, execute, controlling, closing. They're all heading towards your lessons learned. You're collecting that, right? You collect it, your lessons learned throughout initiation, throughout planning, executing, controlling, and it's all being stored in a document. Make sense? So it's all sitting there at that end, but the end result. And so as you progress through, you keep capturing it over and over. And then you obviously have a document that you're doing this, right? Your scope, what goes right, time, what's going right, resources, right? It's a very, very simple tool because you've collected it in these buckets. It's going to be very, very easy to fill in. So lessons learned should not be a lot of overhead. And really, if you change the conversation and make it about course corrections, it's going to actually really change the dynamics of how you're using this tool going forward. And it's simple, right? It's very simple, easy to fill in form, easy to read, doesn't have to be complex, doesn't have to take a lot of time. You just have to do it. And you want to do it from the very first status meeting and really want to hear firsthand as you execute through your project. Okay, number 3, best practice number 3, review project lessons learned information from past projects. I can't stress enough, there's some great project management being done out there, and there's some great learnings that you can learn from. So I strongly suggest you look at lessons learned from past projects. So one of the biggest mistakes that project managers make is to stop learning and stop trying to improve their skills. Oh, I've done this a million times, I don't need to improve it anymore. Once a project manager gives up and stops wanting to learn, their projects will suffer. We see this all the time. I've seen this running large PMOs. We see this, right? Project managers can't stop learning. So one of the best ways to learn is to review what project managers have done and other project managers and the goodness that they've done and some of the challenges they've had as well. So there's really that combination. You really want to look at both of them. So large projects are going on in every project, in every company. Small projects, medium-sized projects. You can get lessons learned from all of them. But they really, when they hire hired guns, when they bring in some experts and some specialty senior level people to run the larger efforts, really latch onto those guys and see what they're doing, right? Because the bigger they are, the more experienced the project managers tend to be, and the more consultants in a lot of cases they use. And some of these consultants you can learn some amazing things from them. The more experienced a PM is, the more you can learn from them. I can't stress that enough. So how do you do that? How do you learn from a hired gun, right? Well, start reviewing their projects. Look how they're managing their projects. Look at their key deliverables. Look at how they're applying project management to their efforts, right? Focus on your research and then the real tactical aspects of how they're running their project. Look at their budget information, right? How is their budget being managed? What reports? What dashboards? Look at their schedules. Look at their resources, right? Look at the big buckets of information, risks and issues. Do they have separate risk and issue meetings? Do they do it all at once? Look at how they're doing across these big buckets of project management, and you'll start very, very quickly picking up all of how they do their work, and therefore you can copy some of that. Right? And so if they're experienced and hired guns that are really experts in their space, you want to learn from them where possible. So when reviewing the various aspects of the project, so those big buckets, what went right, what went wrong, what could have gone better, right? Across schedule, communications, budget, resources, right? Again, look at all the goodness that they're doing and start focusing on those three simple questions. One of the things that we've seen lots is companies have centralized databases or SharePoint sites or places where they store lessons learned information. The problem is they never go get them. They never go back to them, right? They're harder and harder to find. You do find them. The data is unbelievable. But one of the problems is people just never go back. So we do all the lessons learned, we fill it in. If people don't go back, and I'm saying we need to change that. People need to go back and spend that time. All right. One of the things, let's look at best practice number 4. But one of the things you really want to do is show discretion in capturing your lessons learned information. I can't stress that enough. Trust in that discretion is a huge component. So collecting lessons learned throughout the life of the project requires discretion, right? It's not an information that you're going to want to share in a lot of cases, but it's information that you can get to do course correction, but tends to be just for you. You'll share it at the end of the project when it's all cleaned up. Project managers are going to have to be discreet, though. Bob's a horrible developer. Bob's a horrible developer. Bob's a horrible developer. Well, what if Bob sees that, right? So you really don't want that to be shared. But if Bob is really struggling, then Bob may need to be replaced. And so there's a kind of a catch-22 there. You need to capture that information, but you're going to also need to use that information to replace Bob. So sharing information that should not be shared can quickly turn your team into not trusting you. I can't stress enough. If you've got that document we just talked about and you're building up your lessons learned, you're building up your lesson learned, and then all of a sudden that thing gets shared, that could be a huge problem. Okay? So collect your lessons learned in an offline folder in a document that's not shareable. Put a password on it. Offline hard drives, secured folders, but wherever you collect the data, make sure there's security and discretion wherever possible. Sharing Bob's always late in his deliverable, Mary's the worst employee ever, right? It's not going to help anyone. It's not going to motivate anyone. It's not going to be a good thing, but it is data that's often collected. And I've done this for many, many years, and sadly it is data. There will be people that come up and say, Bob's always late. People squealing on other people. Not the purpose of lessons learned unless it starts impacting your project, but it's data that you're going to want to capture. And again, here's what that table would look like, right? Your area, your what's going right, what's going on, what's not going well, what could have gone better, notes. This is just it all filled in. And again, just a horrible communicator. You don't want to put that out. There's no FTE budget for the project. FTEs are going to be really stressed that there's no budget for their project. So this is the kind of information that's great to capture, but you do not want to get it out. Right? This is the type of information you will hear from your team, though. I can't stress enough. But what do you do with it? Is it helpful? Right? If project managers hear from one employee and complain about another, no. If it's just one person complaining about another person, that's not really helpful. But if there's a trend and multiple people complain, then that's a bigger issue. So if there's a trend, watch that trend, not for too long, but you also don't want to rush it, but you want to make sure you're seeing the same thing and you're hearing it and then you react. Right? Make sure you don't react too quickly because that could be a huge problem. And again, it will hurt your reputation. So you really got to watch that. So watching and listening to your project team members is a critical way of staying connected to your project, right? Project managers must spend the time and listen, but don't react immediately. I can't stress enough. Building bonds and understanding your team members will give you that best chance of delivering a successful project. Okay, number 5, best practice, reporting lessons learned information at the end of the project. So throughout the project, we've been building. You can see in the graphic there, we're all heading towards that lessons learned document. So one of the last items that project managers complete in shutting down a project is to hold the lessons learned review meeting, right? Most of you guys are doing that today. I get that. But again, this is one of the last steps. However, most project managers make the mistake of letting the project close or getting very close to finishing, and then they start collecting that lessons learned. No, you got to collect it throughout the life of the project. We've been saying that all along. That is a huge mistake. So remember this process, remember this graphic, right? Check, 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 and it's all kind of pointing towards as you go through initiation, planning, execute, control, and closing, they're heading towards that one single document, the lessons learned. Okay? So really, really important there. And again, it's all about that process of collecting throughout the life of the project. So the process that you're going through captures it throughout the life of the project. But then you'll, at the end of the process, you're going to have a huge table of data. You're going to have to clean up. You're going to really have to sanitize it and then get it ready to report out. But if you don't follow this process, right, and doing it throughout the life of the project, you're going to find that your people are long gone. They're not going to give you information when they're in other groups, other organizations, or even working on other projects. So you got to be constantly filling in this table as that graphic has stated and has indicated. Okay? So then what you're going to do is you're going to sanitize it, of course, but you're going to take that table and you're going to produce a lessons learned presentation, right? So following the process of collecting lessons learned throughout the project is critical, ensuring you've not missed anything along the way or done course corrections. If you've ever tried to get information from team members who are long gone, left the project, it's never going to happen. They're not going to give you the time of day. They're moved on. So you want to capture that and get that information while they're still on the projects. But compiling this information can be challenging, and bubbling it up can be very difficult. You want to look for trends, you want to look for patterns, and you really want to report it up to have a good, solid lessons learned meeting. But again, lessons learned is about capturing along the way. So as we summarize, lessons learned information is critical to start capturing from the very beginning and throughout the life of the project. Can't stress that enough. Adding lessons learned information to your weekly agenda provides you that constant reminder, and it allows you to capture this valuable information to make those course corrections. Look for trends, look for continued improvement. Course correction throughout your life of your project gives you the best chance of being successful and delivering a successful project. More information, check out my book, Project Management Communication Tools, up on Amazon. If you want to get a hold of me, Bill Dow at dowpublishingllc.com. I've got a blog at billdowpmp.com. There are my 4 books. You can get me on Twitter, on Facebook. I'm very, very active on social media, so there should be no problems getting a hold of me. Thank you for your time.